All right, hello everyone. So today we're jumping back to the 1950s. This was a time when a massive technological race wasn't just, a big deal for the decade. It literally changed everything. We're going to dig into this pivotal moment where it looked like one side had completely lost and how that incredible failure actually kicked off a revolution that we're still living in today.
So where does it all begin? Well, believe it or not, it started with a sound. Just a simple, repeating beep coming from space. But for a global superpower, that little sound wasn't some amazing scientific achievement. No, it was a massive blow to their pride, and it kicked off what this U.S. official called a real crisis of confidence.
Now you might be asking, why would a tiny little satellite cause such a massive panic? Well, to get that, we've got to zoom out and look at the bigger picture, right? The Cold War. By 1957, the world was pretty much split in two. The nuclear arms race was in full swing, and every single move, whether from the United States or the Soviet Union, was seen as part of this incredibly high-stakes game for who would dominate the planet.
In that beep, well, on October 4th, 1957, it got a name, Sputnik 1. This was it, the world's very first artificial satellite, and it was launched by the Soviet Union. As this thing orbited the Earth, that signal wasn't just saying, hey, look at this cool new tech, it was screaming to the entire world that the Soviets were now in the lead in the space race.
Okay, so this connects directly to our AMC program. We're looking at the theme of savoir, création, innovation, knowledge, creation, and innovation. And our main axis is science et technique, promesses et défis. So the promises and challenges of science and technology. This story is a perfect example of that. It's all about how this huge technological défi, this challenge, really redefined global power, the whole enjeu de puissance.
So, this all leads us to our guiding question for today's explainer. How on earth did a spectacular, very public failure ignite the technological revolution that defines our world today? That's what we're going to unpack. How this moment of total humiliation became the catalyst, the spark for decades of American tech dominance.
All right, here's our plan. We'll start with that beep heard round the world. Then we'll look at the Sputnik crisis and America's, Flopnik failure. From there, we'll see the ARPA revolution, and then we'll check out the incredible tech legacy that came out of all this. And finally, we'll wrap up with some key takeaways for your exams. Sound good? Let's dive in.
Okay, so first up, that beep heard round the world. You have to understand, the launch of Sputnik was way more than just a cool science experiment. For the United States, it was a huge psychological and ideological blow.
So, let's look at the details. The CIA immediately called it a stupendous scientific achievement, which, it was, but they also knew exactly what it really meant. See, the scary part wasn't the 184-pound metal ball. It was the rocket that got it up there. The implication was terrifyingly clear. If the Soviets could launch a satellite, they could launch a nuclear warhead anywhere on Earth. Suddenly, the battlefield wasn't just land, sea, or air. It was space. All right, so the pressure was on. America had to respond, and fast. But what happened next? Well, it wasn't exactly a triumph. It was rushed, it was public, and it was a total disaster that just made the national crisis even worse.
Just look at this comparison. It's just incredible. On one hand, you have the Soviets' 184-pound Sputnik successfully orbiting the Earth. Then, 2 months later, the U.S. comes out with Project Vanguard. Its satellite weighed a tiny 3.5 pounds, and it rose about 4 feet off the launch pad before exploding in this massive fireball on live television. The press, of course, went nuts. They nicknamed it Flopnik and Kaputnik. This wasn't just a technical failure. It was a public relations nightmare.
And Senator Lyndon B. Johnson, who would later become president, summed up how everyone felt. He just called it most humiliating. And to add insult to injury, Soviet delegates at the UN started jokingly asking American officials if they needed technical assistance. The kind of aid they offered to backward nations. It was just a complete and total embarrassment on the world stage.
But out of all this humiliation came a really important realization. The answer wasn't just build a better rocket. No, they had to completely rethink how they approached innovation itself. America needed a totally new kind of organization, something specifically designed to make sure a technological surprise like Sputnik could never happen again.
And this is the pivot. In 1958, President Eisenhower creates ARPA, the Advanced Research Projects Agency. Its mission sounds simple, but it was incredibly ambitious. Prevent technological surprises and create American technological superiority. Basically, they were told to fund the crazy ideas that could change the world,
to make sure the US was always one step ahead.
And this was the real game changer, the ARPA management style. This wasn't some slow, stuffy government committee. ARPA was built to be lean, fast, and agile. The model was to hire a handful of brilliant program managers, give them a ton of freedom and a big budget, and let them bet on high-risk, visionary projects that no private company would ever touch. And a key part of their strategy was to pour resources into elite universities, creating these incredible centers of excellence.
So what happened next? Well, the creation of ARPA had consequences that went way, way beyond the Cold War. In fact, it basically laid the groundwork for the digital world that you and I live in right now.
I mean, seriously, the legacy of this approach is everywhere. The internet you're probably using to watch this? That started as an ARPA project called ARPANET. The GPS that tells you where to go? ARPA. The graphical user interface on your screen, the computer mouse you use to click on things, all of these fundamental technologies of modern life can be traced right back to this period of intense, government-funded military research. And it was all born out of the fear of being technologically surprised again.
Okay, so for your assessments, let's practice building a strong argument. It's a simple structure: idea, example, explanation. So, the idea is that the Sputnik crisis acted as a catalyst for a whole new American model of innovation. Your example: in response to the Vanguard failure, the US government created ARPA in 1958. Simple, direct. And your explanation connects the two. You explain how ARPA's unique structure fostered the breakthroughs that led to long-term tech superiority, like the
Now, here's some key vocabulary for your baccalaureate. Words like catalyst, humiliation, innovation. These are the words you need to use to analyze these documents precisely. For example, you could say the public humiliation of the Sputnik failure was the catalyst that sparked a new era of innovation through high-risk research, ultimately creating America's technological superiority and a legacy we still see today. Practice using these terms.
All right, let's wrap this up. It's time to bring it all together and finally answer our guiding question from the beginning.
So back to the question, how did a spectacular public failure ignite a technological revolution? Well, it's because the failure was so public, so embarrassing, that it became impossible to ignore. The explosion of Vanguard created so much political pressure that it forced the US to do something completely radical. They had to abandon their old, slow way of doing things and create ARPA, this new, agile system for innovation. And that system is what ultimately led to a much bigger, much more lasting victory in the technological long run.
So as we finish, I want to leave you with one last thing to think about. Our whole story shows how this intense competition, this Cold War rivalry, was this incredible engine for innovation in the 20th century. But that begs the question, right? What's the engine for the 21st century? Is it still fierce competition between nations? Is it global collaboration? Is it commercial ambition? That's something for you to consider as you look at the world around you today.